Toto Wolff just revealed something that could decide the entire championship before the first race even begins. We are days away from the Australian Grand Prix, the season opener. And Mercedes has quietly changed the one thing that determines more than half of all position gains in modern Formula One: the first 5 seconds. Because last season, the majority of overtakes in the top field were either made at the start or lost before turn 1. And in Bahrain testing, George Russell admitted their practice launches were the worst of his career. Not average. Not slightly off. The worst. Now suddenly, just days before Melbourne, Toto confirms major engine mapping refinements, torque delivery adjustments, energy deployment recalibration, launch optimization. That is not routine fine-tuning. That is a targeted response. And here's why this is massive. Red Bull looked dominant in straight-line energy release. Ferrari looked stable on long runs. Mercedes did not bring a new engine. They reprogrammed the one they already have. And in modern Formula One, software precision can be worth tenths per lap. Tenths decide poles. Poles decide track position. Track position decides championships. So the real question is simple. Did Mercedes just fix their biggest weakness in time for Australia? Or are we about to witness the first warning sign of another uphill season? Stay with me. Because what was changed inside that power unit might completely reshape the fight at the front. Mercedes is not arriving in Australia with a flashy new engine. And that is exactly what makes this so dangerous. Because what Toto Wolff revealed is not about adding power. It is about controlling it. The W17 already introduced its major aerodynamic shift in Bahrain. Redesigned side pods. A tighter engine cover. A heavily revised floor around the rear tires. That was the visible revolution. Australia is something else entirely. This weekend is about refinement. Between Bahrain and Melbourne, Mercedes focused on engine mapping, internal combustion calibration, energy recovery deployment curves, and most critically, initial torque delivery off the line. That last part is not random. It is strategic. Because under the new regulations, the launch phase is brutally sensitive. These cars are smaller, more reactive, more dependent on perfect synchronization between combustion power and electrical boost. If torque arrives too aggressively, traction disappears instantly. If electrical deployment lags by even a fraction, acceleration collapses. And that is exactly what Russell hinted at when he admitted their starts were unacceptable. Now imagine the pressure inside the factory. Days before the first race. Data being analyzed around the clock. Engineers recalibrating how power transitions from the internal combustion engine to the electric motor. Smoothing the torque curve. Adjusting traction thresholds. Optimizing energy release under overtaking mode conditions. Not to increase maximum output, but to eliminate hesitation. Because hesitation at the start costs positions. Positions cost strategy freedom. Strategy freedom wins races. But here is where things get even more intense. In Bahrain, GPS comparisons suggested Red Bull had superior straight-line energy deployment. At the end of long straights, the Red Bull appeared to pull away. Not dramatically, but consistently. That consistency matters. If Mercedes smooths torque delivery for better launches, they risk softening peak aggression. So the balance is delicate. Fix the start. Maintain straight-line competitiveness. Protect reliability. All at once. And reliability cannot be ignored. There was already a minor power unit concern during testing. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to reduce ideal mileage. Which means validation time was limited. Australia is not just about being fast. It is about proving the recalibration works under real race stress. Full fuel loads. Dirty air. Temperature fluctuations. Pressure. Because Melbourne is not Bahrain. Grip levels evolve rapidly. Track temperatures can swing dramatically across sessions. Cooling efficiency becomes critical. And cooling directly influences how aggressively you can deploy energy. If thermal margins are tight, deployment must be conservative. If margins are stable, engineers can push harder. So when Toto Wolff speaks calmly about adjustments, understand what that really means. Mercedes identified a weakness. They targeted it. They refined the engine's behavior at the most critical moment of a race. The first few meters. And here is the bigger psychological shift. For the first time in years, Russell says the base car does not feel fundamentally flawed. That matters. Because development now builds forward, not sideways. They are not fixing a broken concept. They are sharpening a competitive one. But sharpening a blade does not guarantee victory. It simply prepares you for battle. And in Australia, battle begins instantly. When the lights go out, watch the Mercedes. Not just its top speed. Not just its lap time. Watch how it reacts when torque hits the rear tires. Watch whether it hooks up cleanly. or hesitates. Because if the recalibrated engine mapping delivers exactly what Mercedes expects, then the narrative shifts immediately. They are not chasing. They are fighting. But if the launch weakness remains, if Red Bull still edges ahead in energy deployment, if Ferrari maintains long-run stability, then this quiet engine refinement becomes a desperate patch, not a breakthrough. And that is why this first block matters. Because what sounds like a simple mapping update could quietly determine whether Mercedes starts the season as a contender, or as a team already playing catch-up. But here is where the story becomes even more uncomfortable for Mercedes. Because fixing the launch is only the surface problem. The deeper issue is competitive reality. All winter, there was a narrative building. Mercedes is back. The new concept works. The engine has hidden potential. But when the car actually ran in Bahrain, something shifted. It was quick. Yes. It looked stable. Yes. But it did not look untouchable. Red Bull appeared extremely efficient in straight-line energy deployment. Ferrari looked composed over long runs. And Russell himself described testing as a reality check. That phrase matters. A reality check means expectations were higher than the data supported. So what does Toto Wolff really reveal when he talks about engine refinements? He reveals that Mercedes is reacting. Not panicking, but reacting. They identified two key weaknesses: launch inconsistency and straight-line deployment comparison. And here is the part most fans overlook. Energy deployment is not just about top speed. It is about when and how the energy is released. Deploy too early and you fade before the braking zone. Deploy too late and you never get alongside. Deploy unevenly and tire temperatures spike. So engineers have to choreograph power like a symphony. Combustion engine torque, electrical boost, traction control thresholds, all aligned within milliseconds. In Bahrain, that harmony was not perfect. Now the question is whether Melbourne reveals improvement. Because Albert Park punishes inefficiency. It has medium-length straights where energy management is critical. It has slow corners where traction decides exit speed. And it has limited overtaking windows, which means qualifying and the first lap are disproportionately important. If Mercedes launches poorly again, they will be trapped. If they deploy energy slightly less aggressively than Red Bull, they will struggle to defend. And if Ferrari manages tires better over a stint, Mercedes could be pressured strategically. This is why the engine mapping update is so important. It is not about gaining 3/10 instantly. It is about removing weaknesses that cost positions. Because in modern Formula One, you rarely win from pure dominance. You win by eliminating vulnerabilities. And Toto Wolff understands perception. He knows that if Mercedes starts the season strongly, confidence builds. Development accelerates. Momentum grows. But if Australia exposes unresolved issues, the narrative flips. Pressure increases. Questions multiply. Every data point becomes scrutinized. There is also another silent factor. Reliability confidence. During testing, there was already a minor power unit concern that reduced clean mileage. That does not mean the engine is fragile. But it means validation was not perfect. When you combine mapping changes with limited validation time, risk exists. And Australia is not forgiving. Race pace. High load phases. Constant gear changes. Aggressive curb strikes. Everything stresses the system. So Mercedes is walking a tightrope. They must push hard enough to compete with Red Bull and Ferrari. But not so hard that they introduce new problems. And this is where Toto's revelation becomes psychologically powerful. He is signaling control. He is signaling precision. He is telling rivals, we saw the weakness, we corrected it. But whether that correction is sufficient? That answer is only seconds away from being exposed. When the lights go out in Melbourne, the first launch will reveal months of work. The first straight will expose deployment efficiency. The first defensive maneuver will test confidence. And if the Mercedes hooks up perfectly, holds position, and matches Red Bull's energy release, then everything changes. Because that means the weakness was temporary. But if there is hesitation, if there is wheel spin, if there is even a slight drop-off in straight-line pull, then the winter optimism fades instantly. And that is why this is bigger than a mapping tweak. It is the first real measure of whether Mercedes truly rebuilt a contender, or simply polished an unfinished machine. Now let's go one level deeper. Because performance in Australia will not just expose Mercedes. It will expose Toto Wolff's entire strategic direction. For the past 2 seasons, Mercedes has been rebuilding, experimenting, correcting philosophical mistakes from the early ground effect era. This year was supposed to be different. This year was supposed to be stable. And to be fair, the W17 does look fundamentally healthier. Russell has openly said the car does not feel structurally flawed. That is a massive internal shift. When a driver trusts the base platform, development becomes aggressive. When a driver doubts it, development becomes cautious. But trust alone does not beat Red Bull. And it does not intimidate Ferrari. So here is the uncomfortable question Mercedes must answer in Melbourne. Is this car capable of sustained front-running pace? Not a single quick lap. Not a strong qualifying session. Sustained pressure over a full race distance. Because Bahrain hinted at something important. The car looked competitive on single lap pace. But long-run comparisons suggested Red Bull still has an edge in energy efficiency. And Ferrari looked extremely composed managing tire degradation. That creates a three-way tension. Mercedes may have improved launches. They may have refined deployment. But can they maintain performance under continuous load? Because Albert Park amplifies weaknesses over time. Dirty air builds tire temperature. Energy recovery cycles fluctuate. Fuel loads change balance. If the engine mapping is optimized for the start but less efficient over extended stints, that trade-off will appear by lap 15. And that is where championships are shaped. Not in the opening meters, but in consistency. Toto Wolff's revelation about engine refinement suggests confidence. But it also suggests awareness. They know exactly where the vulnerability was. And when a team focuses so precisely on one weakness, it usually means that weakness cost them something significant in testing simulations. Now imagine the internal scenario. Simulated race starts show position loss. Simulated race pace shows difficulty overtaking due to slightly weaker deployment at the end of straights. Engineers respond by recalibrating torque blending and energy release timing. But here is the danger. Modern power units operate on razor-thin margins. Adjusting mapping for launch behavior affects thermal load. Thermal load affects cooling. Cooling affects aerodynamic efficiency. Everything connects. So when Toto says they refined engine behavior, it is not isolated. It is systemic. They adjusted how the car behaves in the first 5 seconds, which influences how it behaves for the next 90 minutes. And this is where the psychological battle begins. If Mercedes arrives in Australia and immediately looks sharp off the line, rivals will notice. Confidence spreads internally. Pressure shifts externally. But if even a small hesitation appears, critics will amplify it. Because expectations were raised. All winter, there was hype around Mercedes' potential engine advantage. Around clever interpretations. Around theoretical gains. Now the stopwatch replaces theory. And the stopwatch is unforgiving. There is another silent factor here. Momentum. The first race sets tone. If Mercedes leaves Melbourne with a podium earned through strong launches and stable energy deployment, development momentum accelerates. Sponsors relax. Engineers push harder. Drivers believe. If they leave Melbourne having struggled at the start or lacking straight-line defense, urgency increases. And urgency sometimes leads to rushed solutions. That is why this weekend feels heavier than a typical season opener. It is not just race 1. It is validation. Validation that the recalibrated engine map solved the launch crisis. Validation that straight-line deployment can match Red Bull. Validation that the W17 is genuinely a step forward, not just cosmetically improved. And when the lights go out in Melbourne, everything compresses into one brutal moment. Clutch release. Throttle input. Electrical surge. Rear tires gripping the asphalt. In that instant, months of engineering decisions collide. If Mercedes nails it, the narrative flips immediately. They are not rebuilding. They are ready. But if there is hesitation, if Red Bull edges ahead effortlessly, if Ferrari slips past under traction, then Toto Wolff's revelation becomes something else. Not a breakthrough, but a warning. And that is why Australia matters more than most people realize. Because sometimes, the first race does not just start a season. It reveals who truly understood the new era first.